Welcome to the debate. Imagine trying to design a multi-million-dollar marketing campaign, but you are legally prohibited from actually recommending your product to the very people who need it most.
Right. You can't just run a flashy ad telling patients to go buy your medicine.
Exactly. You have to communicate highly complex, life or death scientific data through a highly restricted channel of medical professionals. And all of this while government regulators scrutinize every single adjective you use. That is the reality of pharmaceutical marketing.
It really is an incredibly high-stakes environment. I mean, you aren't just selling a consumer good here, you are influencing patient outcomes. And because the barrier to entry is so complex, how young professionals actually break into this field is undergoing this massive shift, right?
Spot on. Today we are looking at a critical crossroads for students and recent graduates looking to build a career in this space. And, it's a lucrative growing path. The U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics actually projects a 6% employment growth in marketing management from 2024 to 2034.
Wow, yeah, that is significant growth.
It is, but entering this field requires navigating rigorous industry guidance and mastering a strict regulatory environment. The central question we are exploring today is this: is pharmaceutical sales experience a necessary stepping stone for an aspiring pharmaceutical marketer, or can students successfully enter marketing directly through other channels?
Yeah, it's a question that really divides the industry.
It definitely does. I'll state my position right up front. Because of the highly regulated nature of this ecosystem and the absolute necessity of understanding complex clinical evidence in a real-world setting, I argue that pharmaceutical sales experience is the fundamental, indispensable crucible.
Okay.
If you want to be a marketer, you must first understand the reality of the healthcare professional's daily life, and sales is the only true way to get that.
Well, I come at it from a different way. My position is that while sales experience offers undeniable value, it is explicitly not compulsory. Direct entry routes through analytics, healthcare agencies, and market research are equally rigorous.
Really? Equally rigorous?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, I'd argue they often do a much better job of building the specific commercial, data-driven, and omni-channel competencies that modern pharmaceutical marketing actually demands.
I see why you think that, but let me give you a different perspective on skipping sales. The problem with bypassing sales is that you skip the ultimate classroom. Pharmaceutical marketing requires clinical literacy and a finely tuned ethical judgment, right?
Right, no argument there.
So when a student takes a pharmaceutical sales role as their entry point, they are gaining unparalleled, direct insight into the specific friction points doctors face. They see the prescribing barriers in real time. They see how a physician reacts physically and verbally to the promotional materials the marketing department created.
Yeah, but
If you skip sales, you deprive yourself of understanding how your campaign actually performs in the real world.
the modern reality of how we communicate has fundamentally changed. The industry guidance we are looking at explicitly states that pharmaceutical sales experience is valuable but not compulsory. We have to recognize that modern marketing requires interpreting vast amounts of evidence at scale.
At scale, sure, but
It requires defining highly specific audiences through data and measuring campaign performance using brand planning and CRM platforms. A new graduate with a bachelor's degree, whether in business or hard science like pharmacology, can build those exact competencies through specialized internships or agency work without ever carrying a bag in a sales territory.
let's talk about what interpreting evidence actually means in practice. You mentioned data at scale, but I argue marketers must understand therapeutic areas and clinical endpoints in a visceral way, not just as numbers on a spreadsheet.
Okay, how so?
Trying to design a pharmaceutical campaign without having first sold the drug to a physician is like a naval architect trying to design a ship without ever having been to sea. You might understand the math perfectly, but you don't understand the weather.
That naval architect analogy sounds great in theory, but in practice, that weather a sales rep experiences is just a localized microclimate.
A microclimate, it's face-to-face interaction with the exact target audience.
Yes, but a sales rep only sees a remarkably narrow slice of the market. They might see, 70 or 100 physicians in their specific geographic radius in Ohio or Florida. That anecdotal experience is incredibly vivid, but it is inherently biased by regional prescribing habits and local insurance formulary restrictions.
It still teaches them the fundamental human behaviors.
Sure, but it doesn't scale. Contrast that with an entry-level commercial analyst or a market research assistant. They aren't looking at a microclimate. They are tracking the macro weather patterns.
But macro data strips away the human element of medicine.
It doesn't strip it away, it aggregates it into actionable insights. An analyst is learning customer segmentation across the entire country. They learn to identify systemic prescribing barriers. If you rely solely on what Dr. Smith told you on a Tuesday in his clinic, you're designing a campaign for Dr. Smith, not the broader market.
You're assuming the analyst actually understands what those data points represent, though. The macro data tells you what is happening. It tells you that prescriptions for your cardiovascular drug are dipping in the Southeast.
Right.
But the field experience tells you why it's happening. The analyst sees a dip. The sales rep sitting in the waiting room knows it's because a competitor's rep was just there aggressively highlighting an adverse event profile that the macro data hasn't fully quantified yet.
Well, a good omni-channel marketer doesn't need to be in the waiting room to figure out the why. They use sophisticated CRM tools and digital feedback loops. If a competitor is pushing a specific adverse event narrative, the digital marketing team sees the search trends changing.
Search trends aren't the whole story.
They see which specific digital visual aids physicians are engaging with. They have the data.
Which brings us to the elephant in the room. Data might tell you who to target and what they care about, but the federal government dictates what you can legally say to them. You can't just pivot your digital ad because you saw a search trend.
Of course not. Compliance is non-negotiable.
Right. Under 225 CFR 202.1, prescription drug advertising must not be misleading, and it must present a fair balance of risks and benefits. Dealing with medical, legal, and regulatory review, what the industry calls MLR, is the bedrock of this job.
It absolutely is.
And in the field, a sales rep has to deliver that fair balance in real time. Imagine a doctor asks an off-label question, a question about using the drug for an unapproved condition. The rep has to navigate that conversation carefully, providing scientific information without violating promotional boundaries.
That's true. It is a high-pressure situation.
That high-stakes pressure cooker creates a reflexive respect for FDA guidelines. I'm not convinced by that line of reasoning because a desk job simply cannot replicate the anxiety and responsibility of representing a regulated product face-to-face with a prescriber.
That's a compelling argument, but have you considered that students who enter through healthcare agencies or medical communications roles are the ones actually building the architecture of that compliance?
Building it, maybe, but not executing it.
A sales rep is handed a legally approved script and a visual aid. They are taught to stay within the lines that someone else drew. They didn't write it. An entry-level copywriter at an agency or a junior digital marketing associate has to understand the specific FDA Office of Prescription Drug Promotion guidelines, the OPD rules, from the ground up.
But knowing the rules is different from living them.
They are the ones who have to know the mechanical difference between a brief summary of side effects required in a print advertisement versus a major statement required in a consumer-directed broadcast ad.
Knowing the mechanical difference on paper is entirely different from defending it.
But they do defend it. The junior marketer is the one who has to sit in the MLR review meeting. Let's unpack what an MLR meeting actually is, because it is essentially a corporate courtroom.
It definitely feels like one sometimes.
Right? You have a medical director, a regulatory attorney, and the marketer. If the marketer uses the word rapid to describe how fast the drug works, the regulatory attorney will stop the meeting and demand substantiation.
Exactly.
The entry-level marketer has to pull up the Kaplan-Meier curve from the Phase 3 clinical trial to legally prove that the onset of action was statistically significant. They are defending the claim substantiation to the legal team. They learn the DNA of compliance.
I'm not denying the rigor of an MLR review, but you are leaving out the practical application. You can sit in an agency conference room and draft what you think is a perfectly compliant, beautifully balanced digital aid.
Interacts with it. Do they read the safety information or do they gloss over it? Does the phrasing of your major statement actually confuse them in practice? You don't truly understand the functional reality of regulated communication. The field is the stress test for that architecture.
But we can track exactly how long they spend looking at the safety information on a digital aid down to the millisecond. We don't need to stand over their shoulder in an office to see if they read it.
Oh, come on. That's a metric, not an insight. Milliseconds on a screen don't tell you if the doctor actually internalized the risk profile.
It's hard data, though.
But let's look at this from the perspective of a hiring manager. Direct entry into pharma marketing is exceptionally competitive. No one is handing a newly graduated student a brand manager title.
True, it's very competitive.
If a candidate doesn't have a track record in sales where they have empirical, quota-driven proof that they can absorb clinical data, respect compliance boundaries, and drive commercial results, how do they prove their competence? A sales track record is undeniable proof of capability.
They prove their competence by building a robust, highly focused portfolio. That is the modern equivalent of the sales track record. A student doesn't need to spend 2 years carrying a bag just to generate practical evidence of their ability to understand the science.
What does a portfolio for a highly regulated pharmaceutical role actually look like, though? You can't just mock up a billboard like you would for a sneaker company.
Exactly, which is why a strong pharma marketing portfolio is so impressive to a hiring manager. An aspiring marketer can develop a comprehensive campaign brief based entirely on publicly available clinical data.
Sure, but anyone can pull data.
But they can also build a detailed healthcare professional audience profile. They can map out an omni-channel communication plan showing exactly how a specialist receives an email, transitions to an unbranded disease awareness webinar, and later interacts with a digital visual aid.
But again, if they haven't been trained by a pharmaceutical company's compliance department, how does an employer know the student didn't just invent all the clinical claims in that portfolio? It's easy to make a product look good if you ignore the adverse events.
Because the portfolio itself is a demonstration of regulatory restraint. The core skill a student shows in this portfolio is the rigorous separation of approved evidence from assumptions.
Okay, how so?
A smart student pulls the actual FDA-approved prescribing information, the PI, for a drug. They use real clinical trial endpoints. By intentionally avoiding unsupported clinical claims and ensuring fair balance in their mock-ups, the candidate proves they can interpret scientific information accurately.
So they are essentially self-imposing MLR standards on their own homework.
Precisely. They are showing an employer, look, I respect healthcare communication restrictions. I understand how to substantiate a claim based on a mechanism of action. Employers are desperate for people who understand how to structure commercial recommendations logically.
I can see that.
If a student walks into an interview and can articulate why they positioned a therapy a certain way based on its clinical profile, that is immensely powerful evidence.
Okay, I will concede that a scientifically rigorous portfolio is a tremendous asset. It shows initiative. And I agree that entry routes like a digital marketing associate or a healthcare agency account executive provide excellent training for promotional review and project management.
Thank you.
But there is a glaring operational gap here. Our source material highlights cross-functional collaboration, specifically with the sales team, as a required skill for marketers.
Marketing and sales have to work together. Yes, definitely.
Right. And a marketer who has never been in sales often struggles to build credibility with the field force. When you sit at corporate and roll out a new national campaign, the seasoned sales reps in the room are going to look at you and wonder, does this person actually know what it's like to try and get 3 minutes of a busy cardiologist's time? Do they know what it feels like to be aggressively questioned about a drug's side effect profile in front of a waiting room full of patients? There is a profound cultural divide, and if the sales team doesn't buy into your campaign, the campaign fails.
That credibility gap can exist, but you don't close it by just telling war stories about sitting in waiting rooms. Collaboration works both ways. A marketer with a strong data analytics background brings something to the sales force that they desperately need: targeted, actionable insights.
But if the reps don't respect the marketer, they won't use the insights.
They will respect the marketer who makes their job easier and makes them more money. When a junior product specialist hands a sales team an omni-channel plan that says, hey, we have already warmed up these specific 30 physicians through this sequence of digital touchpoints.
Assuming the digital touchpoints actually worked.
Well, they have the data that they engaged with our clinical data online. So your next call will have a higher conversion rate. That builds credibility instantly. The value a modern marketer brings isn't shared trauma from the field. The value is that they are actively removing friction from the sales process through sophisticated strategy.
That implies a perfectly seamless integration between digital marketing and field sales, which any veteran of this industry will tell you is incredibly rare. The friction is always there.
Fair point. It's rarely seamless.
But as we synthesize these two approaches, we actually arrive at a significant amount of common ground regarding the underlying requirements of the profession.
We do. Whether you start in a territory or at a desk, the core demands of the industry remain the same.
Right.
We both agree with the industry guidance that a successful pharmaceutical marketer must demonstrate a combination of commercial acumen, clinical literacy, and rigorous regulatory discipline. You simply cannot survive in this field without all three.
And we also agree on how students should approach their knowledge gaps. The guidance is clear that you do not need every possible qualification before applying for an entry-level role.
Absolutely not.
One of the smartest things a candidate can do is focus intensely on one specific therapeutic area. If a student dives deep into the clinical data of oncology, or immunology, or rare diseases, they can prove their scientific curiosity and analytical skills to an employer, regardless of their background.
That focus is critical because it moves the candidate from being a marketing generalist to a healthcare specialist. However, our fundamental disagreement about the ideal pathway definitely remains.
It does.
I firmly maintain that sales is the absolute best, most comprehensive foundation there is. There is simply no substitute for understanding the human element of prescribing barriers, the real-world application of scientific communication, and the immediate face-to-face ethical pressures of FDA compliance. To me, field experience is the irreplaceable bedrock of great pharmaceutical marketing.
And I maintain that the landscape has irreversibly shifted. While sales offers a unique perspective, modern pharmaceutical marketing is an omni-channel discipline. Skills like data interpretation, audience segmentation, complex brand strategy, and digital compliance architecture are much more efficiently honed through direct commercial internships, analytics roles, or healthcare agency work.
It's a very different skill set.
Exactly. The modern marketer is the conductor of a digital ecosystem, and those crucial skills are built at the desk and in the data, not just in the clinic.
It is exactly that complexity that makes the pharmaceutical marketing ecosystem so fascinating to navigate. For the students and recent graduates listening, the optimal path ultimately depends on an honest assessment of your own developmental needs and natural strengths.
Right.
If you need to build resilience, master direct customer engagement, and learn how to communicate science in real time, the sales route will give you an unparalleled education.
Conversely, if your strengths lean heavily toward data analysis, interpreting clinical trial statistics, digital strategy, or campaign architecture, then targeting direct marketing routes, agencies, or market research might be the much more efficient path to making an impact.
The most important takeaway is that you must build a qualification profile that employers can trust. We strongly encourage you to explore the source material further. Look into resources like PharmUni, review the FDA's OPDP guidelines yourself, or investigate specialized university programs.
And identify your specific industry knowledge gaps and close them. Don't let the regulatory barriers intimidate you. Let them guide how you build your practical evidence.
We started this discussion by acknowledging that pharmaceutical marketing is highly restricted. It is not an escalator where you just passively ride to the top. It is a complex maze.
A very highly regulated maze.
Exactly. There are multiple entry points and completely different ways to reach the center. Whether you map that maze by walking it step by step in the field as a representative, or by studying the blueprints from above through data and analytics, the ultimate goal of the profession remains exactly the same.
Connecting life-changing clinical evidence with the healthcare professionals who need it to treat their patients.
Precisely. Which path will you choose to navigate the maze?
That is the ultimate question for the next generation of marketers.
Thank you for joining us. We will leave you to form your own conclusion.